What does culturally responsive practice mean? You may have heard this term recently, or you may have heard culturally responsive teaching, culturally sustaining teaching, or some other similar term. While each has its own definition, they all center around a mindset, not a curriculum or set of lessons that recognizes and intentionally takes into account learners' diverse needs. Like the term suggests, the focus of CRP is on cultural needs. However, the same concept can also be applied to the needs of in other areas such as socioeconomic, race or gender-based, ability, age, etc., or any combination of needs. The National Education Association defines cultural competence as having an awareness of one's own cultural identity and views about difference, and the ability to learn and build on the varying cultural and community norms of students and their families. This is more than just surface, concrete, observable differences, such as dress, language, and material things. Cultural competence refers to deep culture, such as how information is passed down, written or oral, or how people function in society, individualism versus collectivism. Deep culture governs our worldview, which may be different than someone else's worldview. Gloria Ladson-Billings, a leader in culturally responsive teaching, says that a culturally responsive teacher is someone who understands that we're operating in a fundamentally inequitable system. She also says that we need to rethink the inequitable pyramid structure and think more about a circle that includes everyone. This means working with learners to get them to think critically about issues that are important to them, not issues that are important to the teacher. One of the goals of CRP is empowering learners to become independent learners. However, taking a learner-centered and learner-directed approach to teaching can make teachers nervous that they won't be able to cover the required standards or that the learners won't learn everything they need. This assumption is false, and as we continue through this course, you will see how you can adjust your teaching to be more culturally responsive. First, let's explore 4 areas of CRP: awareness, learning partnerships, information processing, and community building, that Zaretta Hammond outlines in her book, Culturally Responsive Teaching and the Brain. The first area, awareness, means being aware and thinking critically about the racialized society we live in. It means being aware that some have unearned privilege and others experience unearned disadvantages. It means being aware of the impact of your own cultural lens on how you interpret and evaluate others' behavior or background knowledge. Finally, it means being aware of your own unconscious and implicit bias. You don't think you hold any implicit bias? Quick, what do cows drink? Not milk, but we have a strong association in our brain between cows and milk. Cows drink water. This is a very simple example of implicit bias, which occurs when our brains create shortcuts based on how we have been primed. The way our brains create shortcuts to quickly make sense of data is innate. How we have been primed to make harmful associations about different categories of people is not, but is rather the result of messaging, policies, and practices that have been applied throughout history to include or exclude groups of people. Examining your own implicit bias can help you become more aware of how your actions, thoughts, beliefs, nonverbal cues, body language, etc. can affect your learners. Harvard has an implicit bias test which can help you think about your own implicit biases. The next area involves learning partnerships. This is not just partnerships between learners, but includes a partnership with the teacher and learners. Building partnerships helps build trust to enhance the social emotional well-being of learners, which, as Hammond discusses, is crucial for deeper learning. Without getting into too much brain science, if a learner feels any kind of stress, anxiety, lack of belonging, etc., their brain goes into flight or fight mode and does not allow any resources to be used for learning. The stress or anxiety does not have to stem from major events. It could stem from small interactions, comments, feelings of uneasiness, or microaggressions. On the other hand, if a learner feels safe, both socially and physically, then the brain can relax and is ready to receive and process information for learning. The third area is information processing. Help learners process information by making connections to their culture and cultural modes. Even better, ask them to make the connections. This will strengthen and expand students' intellective capacity so they can engage in deeper, more complex learning. The final area is community building, which involves creating a socially and intellectually safe environment that allows learners to stretch their learning and take risks with learning. Think about how the physical setup of a face-to-face classroom may or may not be culturally neutral. Is the instructor standing in front versus everyone, including the instructor, in a circle? Are learners sitting at tables with other learners to encourage collaboration, or are all learners sitting at individual desks? Are there opportunities for learners to get up and learn in different parts of the room, or do they remain stationary during the whole class? We have discussed CRP, so now the question might be, why is this so important? A few researchers in this area describe why it is important. Stacy Scott says that it validates the learner's understanding of themselves. Bettina Love says that curriculum is a tool to either free or oppress a learner. Zaretta Hammond says that culture is the way that every brain makes sense of the world. Thinking about what these researchers say, we can see how important it is to create an environment which encourages optimal learning. Now we will briefly examine 6 principles Hammond outlines regarding how the brain uses culture to interpret threats and opportunities. 1. The brain naturally seeks to minimize social threats and maximize opportunities to connect with others in a community. Social threats take the form of microaggressions, overt or covert discriminatory behaviors or comments, or hostile communication or spaces. Remember, these social threats are defined by the learners, not the instructor. 2. The brain requires positive relationships, which help keep our safety threat detection system in check. Positive relationships signal to the brain that all is well and the person feels a sense of safety. 3. Culture guides how we process information, so if a learner comes from a culture with an oral tradition, they may be more inclined to learn through stories or music. 4. Attention drives learning. In order to learn something, one must first pay attention to it, which requires active engagement and conscious processing. 5. All new information must be coupled with existing funds of knowledge in order to be learned. Learners need to connect new content to what they already know, which is organized according to our cultural experiences, values, and concepts. The brain physically grows through challenge and stretch, expanding its ability to do more complex thinking and learning. It functions just like a muscle. Your brain wants to help you survive and thrive, and when it feels safe through positive relationships, it is more likely to accomplish this goal. Thus far, you've learned the definition of CRP and how the brain contributes to learning. Now we will focus on 7 ways bias might show up in the classroom as outlined by the Myra Sadker Foundation. 1. Invisibility. Is there an underrepresentation of certain groups in classroom resources and materials? If so, this can imply that these groups are of less value, importance, and significance. 2. Stereotyping. Assigning only traditional or rigid roles or attributes to a group, thus limiting the abilities and potential of that group. This can also happen by denying learners knowledge of the diversity and complexity of and variations among any groups of individuals. 3. Imbalance or selectivity. Presenting only one interpretation of an issue, situation, or group, or distorting reality and ignoring complex and differing viewpoints through selective presentation of materials. 4. Unreality. Presenting an unrealistic portrayal of a country's history and contemporary life experiences. 5. Fragmentation, isolation. Separating issues relating to people of color, women, or other protected groups from the main body of the text. 6. Linguistic bias. Excluding the roles and importance of females by constant use of the generic he and gender-biased words. Linguistic bias also includes issues of ethnicity, culture, and language proficiency. 7. Cosmetic bias. Creating an illusion that a particular text or materials have been infused with equity and diversity when in fact minimal efforts have been made to address diversity throughout the text. This can be seen by including pictures or special sections as segregated portions of the main text. Don't feel overwhelmed by trying to remember all of the ways in which bias can show up in the classroom. There will be a rubric provided that you can use to evaluate your lessons and the materials you use. Finally, let's think about how to start a more culturally responsive teaching practice. The first step is to examine and be comfortable with your own cultural identity. This can be hard and uncomfortable, but that is okay. Sit with the discomfort and learn from it. What is normal for one person may actually be a cultural difference. Learn to recognize what feels normal for you and how that could cause stress or uncomfortable feelings for your learners. Keep in mind that the stress or uncomfortable feelings your learners feel are valid, even if that was not your intention. However, you should be intentional about reflecting on your own cultural experiences when planning lessons, gathering materials, and setting a classroom environment. Remember to support your learners' deep cultural frame of reference. If you don't know what their deep cultural needs are, do some research about their culture or ask them how they prefer to learn and interact with others, including you. Keep in mind this is a practice, much like playing an instrument. If you don't constantly practice, you will lose some of your finesse and ability. Even if you have been practicing your whole life, you will still encounter challenges and make mistakes. CRP is much the same. It is not something to master, it is something to constantly practice, refine, reflect on, and improve. Lastly, the classroom environment should be like a bunch of mirrors and windows. The windows help everyone look into the experience of others, while the mirrors help everyone see themselves reflected in the curriculum. For the references cited in this video and other articles and websites to explore, click on the link found below this video.